a lot. And ultimately, what he said was he was 26, 27, had remarried, had 2 new kids, had a new family, and it was just easier. It was just easier to not complicate.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is the journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is the journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today, like every other day, we have a Memphis icon that's amazing. But before we get to our Memphis icon, we have a quote. We have a quote from the great Marcus Garvey. If you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. Now, what that means is, for me, is that I gotta have confidence in me, because me is the only thing I got. Today, we have a brother who has literally paved the way in uncharted waters in many senses. He is Dr. Floyd Tyler, straight out of Bethel Grove, Memphis, educator, father, PhD, finance executive, entrepreneur, brother bad. Welcome, Dr. Floyd Tyler.
Thank you for having me.
Man,
it's great to be here.
Man, it's great to have you, sir. So we're gonna start right off. Bethel Grove.
Yes.
All right, tell me about that community and how did it influence Brother Floyd Tyler?
Bethel Grove, I think it's sort of part of Orange Mound, but It was a very close-knit community. You knew everybody who lived there. There were old ladies on the porch, making sure you didn't do things you shouldn't be doing.
Oh, okay.
We played lots of sports with neighborhood kids. I loved it. I mean,
Pitch up tackle.
I'm sorry?
Pitch up tackle, touch football. In the middle of the street.
Basketball, marbles, hide and seek.
Okay.
It's everything that kids do to stay out of trouble.
Okay. Who outside of your parents had a big influence on young Floyd Tyler?
So the biggest influence was really when I went to college. When I was 17, and there was a professor, his name was Bob Figgins, and I met him early on in the journey there, and he really took a liking to me, started to mentor me, and really helped instill greater confidence in me, supported me to apply to sort of some different programs around the country.
Okay.
And literally the very first one, it was a program at the University of Washington, Seattle. It was, and we couldn't afford the plane ticket.
Right.
It was like $200 back then. So this professor bought the plane ticket.
Oh, wow.
Out of his own pocket, so I could go to this summer enrichment program. And it probably changed my whole sense of what was possible.
Okay.
It was the first time I had been outside of going to Chicago to see my parents, outside of Memphis, right?
Really?
I had never been outside of just Chicago and Memphis, the only place I've been.
Okay.
My whole existence was inside the 240 loop, right?
Okay.
We were poor, we didn't have much.
So you went to Memphis North. You got to go to Memphis
So I got
North.
to go to Seattle, Washington to this program and just learned, how to study, what ambition looks like, all because of him.
Okay.
Buying this plane ticket for us.
What's his name again?
Dr. Bob Figgins.
Bob Figgins.
Yeah, so we stayed in touch for years. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he had always been a supporter. And so he really was kind of the biggest person outside of my parents.
Okay. What decision as a young man did you make that ended up having lifelong impact?
Right. So I've gotten this question before, so it's a very good question. And it's gonna maybe sound not as inspirational as you might think, but I figured out early on that I didn't want to be poor.
Okay.
That was the overriding feature. We were poor. I had 5 pair of pants, 5 shirts, 1 pair of shoes. I didn't want to live like that, right?
Okay.
And so I decided that I was going to use education to get out of that situation and to improve my situation. So I was going to do well in school. I was going to go to undergraduate. I was going to go to graduate school. I was going to get enough education.
Where did that thinking come from? I mean, I realize you're young, but I mean, the master's and upper graduate, the terminal degrees, Where did that come from?
Well, the terminal degree, so the inspiration for that goes back to Dr. Bob Figgins, right? Because he was a finance professor of economics. Professor of economics.
Right.
And when I got out of school, I came back to graduate in 3 years.
Well, hold on, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about
Well, this is where the graduate school is gonna come in, right? So when I get out of undergraduate, come back to Memphis looking for a job, couldn't find one other than in like sales.
Right.
So I get my first, I get my first job at Prudential. The very first day I walk in, the guy says, you need a new suit, you need a new car, you need new shoes. Because I guess what I had on wasn't, So he says, okay, but you did well on this test, so you got potential. So he gives me a blank sheet of paper. He says, write down everybody you know that makes $40,000. Because in insurance sales, your first set of clients are going to come from family, friends right?
Right.
So he goes to lunch, he comes back, my paper's blank.
Okay.
So he starts like, what have you been doing, right? And I said, look, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody in my family that makes $40,000.
Wow.
And he says, don't worry about it. And I say, you know what, this isn't going to work. I knew it wasn't going to work because I didn't have the circle to be successful.
Okay, but hold on. We got a couple more questions to ask on this segment.
Okay,
Okay.
So graduate school, because the only people I knew that made that kind of money were college professors.
Oh.
So that's when I decided, well, I'll go get a PhD because I can make more than $40,000. So that's the only reason I went to get a PhD. Not because I wanted to teach, but I knew they made $60,000, $65,000.
So poverty really drove.
I don't want to be poor. I'm not going to be.
Oh, wow. Okay. How different are you from the person you dreamed you would be as a young person?
I'm probably more independently minded than I probably thought I would be.
Okay.
I didn't grow up with a sort of a traditional nuclear family. I was raised by an aunt. Parents lived in Chicago. And so I thought I would have this sort of family, and it didn't really work out that way. And it's probably made me more independent, fiercely independent than I probably would have imagined as a kid.
When did you know you were going to be okay? When did you know that you could handle this thing called life?
I'm still working on it. Probably when I got out of PhD school.
Okay.
I was 24. I got my first job at the University of Memphis teaching. Stable job.
What's your why? Why you get up every day?
To
fight that good fight.
Make an impact. I got a daughter. She's 15, and to show her that you can accomplish things. You can do it the right way. That you got to get up every day. You got to be resilient. I think she's watching. So I want to do those things for her, and then I want to have an impact. I want when people, and it's not just about the money. I mean, lots of people have money. You never know they were here, but it's about trying to use that, those resources to have an impact. Yeah. So when it's all said and done, people know I came through here,
right?
And there's a legacy, there's a trail that I was here.
So you mentioned impact, and I think that's a great segue into our final question of the segment. And that question is, what was that moment that impacted you, that helped you to realize that you were a black man? That one moment.
To realize that I was a black man.
Yeah, that pivotal moment. Well, hold on for a second. Listen, we're gonna come right back with Dr. Floyd Tyler, and he's gonna share with you the moment he realized he was a brother. We'll be right back on The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Welcome back to The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we're talking with Dr. Floyd Tyler, entrepreneur, father, finance executive. I mean, he has done a lot of things. But before we get to him unpacking a lot of things that he's done in his life, we were discussing before the break when he realized that he was a black man. So, Dr. Tyler.
All right. So it's actually, I realized I was a black boy.
Okay.
So when I first moved to Memphis, I was 4 years old. And there was a white family actually lived next door to us.
Okay.
So in Bethel Grove, there were actually white families back in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And so one day I was playing, there was a white girl who lived next door, and her father had been out of town for whatever, and he came back into town. And so we were playing in the front yard, in their front yard. And he gets out of the car and immediately tells her, go in the house, go in the house, go in the house. And I'm like probably 6 or 7, something like that at the time. And then he comes over to our house and tells my aunt that I'm not to play with his daughter anymore, ever. And and so she told me, don't play with her anymore. And I, at the time, didn't know why. And I kept asking her, and she said, because you're black. So I was 6, 7 years old, and that happened. And then probably within 5, 6 months, they moved away.
Wow.
So that was probably the first of many reminders of skin color.
Wow. So listen, we're going to rewind it all the way back. Tell us about the household you were raised in Bethel Grove. What was the household? What did it look like?
So raised by an aunt.
Okay.
My mother's older sister. So my parents were divorced.
Oh.
Mom lived in Chicago. Dad lived in Chicago, but they were divorced. Mother couldn't take care of my brother and I. My older brother, he's 3 years older. And so she sent us to Memphis to live with a sister for a year while she got herself together. And then ultimately after a year, she still didn't feel like she could. So we stayed another year, became a year. Right. So the aunt raised us, and she was kind of a disciplinarian. She worked a couple jobs. So she worked like 8 to 3 at one job, and then it went to like 5 to 9 at another job. Right. So you had a lot of time where there was like no adult there, but you had this overreaching sense of what your purpose is, what you're supposed to do, right? So it was just my brother and I, I went to school, did my homework. I was kind of generally a good kid until I got to maybe teenage years.
How did that affect your relationship with your mom, when those years kept?
So probably it bothered me. What's interesting is that it didn't bother me. So as a kid, I saw my parents twice a year, summers and Christmas. I would go up and split time with them, right? And I would go to, sort of PTA events by myself, just because my parents weren't here and mom had to work, right? So I kind of got used to that. So it didn't, for a long time, I thought it didn't really bother me until I had a kid. And once I had a kid, it started to kind of come back because, like, I'm a pretty active father. I couldn't imagine not being with my kid for 2 or 3 days, right? So then I started to think, well, how did y'all cope with your kid being 500 miles away? Right? It just started to kind of mess with, like I wanted to ask him about it. And so ultimately I did. I don't know if you want that detail or not, but actually, so I just called my dad up one day and I said, hey, I want to ask you something. Tell me why you didn't come to get me, right? Because my dad was did well and he had remarried, was doing well in Chicago. And, they had nice furniture, nice place to live, fresh fruit. Like, I thought he was rich. Right. And my mom was, doing fine. She had remarried, but no other children. And he said, well, initially he said, your mom wouldn't let me, right? I was like, well, that don't sound right. Why would a woman not want her kid to be 5 miles away versus 500?
Right.
So I called her up. I said, hey, got a question. This is what he said. She said, well, that's not true. She said, he never asked. So I called him back and said, hey, she said, you never asked. And so he said, a lot. And ultimately what he said was he was 20, 26, 27, had remarried, had 2 new kids, had a new family, and it was just easier. It was just easier to not complicate.
How did that make you feel?
I respected the honesty, right?
Right.
So then I went to her and I said, well, okay, this is what he said, why he didn't make a choice to come get their kid. And why didn't you after you got stabilized?
Right.
She said the same thing, right? It was easier.
Whoa.
Yeah. So no judgment. It was no judgment. I just wanted to know because I had this question. And so to get to your original question, what it meant, what it did is, remember I talked about being fiercely independent? Yeah. So I became even more. And so I think we didn't have a close or don't have a close relationship, not out of any sort of anger or anything like that. It's just that I don't know them that way.
Wow.
That's crazy. I don't.
So listen to what you just heard. This is a grown man whose parents are living. They decided to send him and his brother to Memphis to live as opposed to staying with them in Chicago. Talk about having self-confidence to be successful and what it takes to continue to move forward. I just want to know, being in that experience as a young man, what were some of the fond memories? Because I can't imagine living without my parents. So fond memories of your youth, do you have fond memories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I would go out for the summers and see them.
Okay.
I had a good time seeing them. I mean, they were my parents. It wasn't, if you have this reality, it's the only reality you know, and you might see other people's reality, but this is mine. I didn't, as a kid, my parents lived in Chicago. I lived in Memphis. I saw them twice a year. They sent me Christmas gifts.
So the abandonment.
this is what I'm trying to convey. I didn't feel the abandonment deeply until I had a kid.
Right.
Because what I felt for her, I couldn't imagine not being with her. So then when I flipped the script to look at them, I was like, well, how did you do that?
Right.
And it was expediency for them. They were young, he had started a new family. So it bothered me until I got the explanation from them. And once I got I was able to close.
That would have made me angrier.
I was able to close the book on the not knowing, because the other part of it that I think is part of, that's important to understand is, when I was coming up, I used achievement. I thought achieving in school, right, and being a good kid would make them want to come get me.
Right.
But it didn't. Right? So then I turned it, well, then I have to do this for me. Because there's nothing I could do to convince them to come get me.
Right. How's your brother?
How is he?
How's your relationship?
So he has he's my brother, but we have different fathers.
Okay.
And it's also not close. Because
even though both of you were at the aunt.
Yeah, but the difference, we were raised differently. So my brother was more of an athlete. He kind of wasn't interested in school, did poorly in school. And he had a different set of rules, right? So I get grounded for a B, you get D's and F's, nothing happens, right? He just had a different set of rules.
The higher expectations were placed on you.
Yeah. And so,
go ahead.
Yeah, so we probably fought a lot as a,
As kids?
because I wasn't cool with that. And I probably took it out on him, and he probably took it out on me. So it was, we probably fought a lot. I mean, we're good, but the reality is the way I was raised, and probably the subsequent choices that I've made have left the circle really small of family.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or relational family.
Okay.
Right. So my friends have become more of
That family.
the family. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back let's move a little bit forward rather. Your transition to college. What was that like?
It's a hell of a story. So growing up, I used to read Black Enterprise
Right.
and Jet, and came across this school called Morehouse.
Right.
Only school I wanted to go to. When I sort of read the people that went there, Dr. King, only school I wanted to go to. So only school I applied to. So I apply, get a full scholarship. So I'm done, right?
Right.
This is like in February of my senior year. And then my, so my best friend in high school was a legacy, and he had gotten accepted as well.
Okay.
So this is like April. He comes to class and he's showing off his housing information. It's like, man, this is strange. Like, why not get any housing information, right? So I had given my acceptance of the scholarship in February to my aunt to send in because I was 17 and she was my legal guardian.
Right.
So I called the school and I say, well, I haven't got my housing information. And they say, well, we never got your scholarship acceptance, so we gave it away. Oh. Now, I think I hadn't applied to any other school. I made a 27 on the ACT, took it as a junior, never applied. This is where I'm going.
Right.
So I go home and say to her, did you send in my information? Yeah, scholarship acceptance. She says, no, I didn't. And I'm like, well, why? And she grew up in the Depression. And she says, quote, you can't learn nothing from Black people. And you don't need to go to that school. So I'm devastated. She goes to work. I get a trash bag, put some clothes in it, and I run away.
You ran away?
I ran away. Went downtown to Court Square, caught a bus, went downtown to Court Square. And there were no cell phones, right? So nobody knew where I was. Right. So about 3 o'clock that morning, another aunt, comes to get me. And I go finish my senior year with her. And didn't talk to that aunt for 2 years because she made this unilateral decision to change my world. So it was so late in the school year that most people had given away their financial aid. So UT Martin was the only place. So I called and they said, well, yeah, you can come and we'll give you a full scholarship. Oh, wow. So I'm trying to get out of Memphis, trying to get away from family. Right. I go to UT Martin and with the intent to transfer to Morehouse after a year, and ultimately didn't transfer.
So, I mean, to me, outside looking in, it sounds like your whole childhood was like nothing but ace after ace after ace, which is, adverse, traumatic event for a child. It seems like, it was just consistently. I guess, would that be a correct assessment?
There was a lot of disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of disappointment.
Man. So what role did Memphis play in your adult development? I mean, because married, when did you get married? Let me go back a little bit.
Yeah, I got married early, 1992.
Okay. How old were you?
24.
Okay.
Too early.
Oh, you were really young.
Yeah, too early.
Okay. Yeah. Looking back, any regrets?
Yeah, chose the wrong person.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a few young guys I mentor, and I tell them all the time, there is no more important decision as an adult, sort of outside of your faith, than the person you choose to marry. If you get that right, a lot of things in your life are going to go right. You get that wrong, it's challenging to overcome that. So just married too young, not, no interest in disparaging, but just, I think you're just not as mature. You don't know everything that you want. Other person's young as well. And I think, I would have made a different choice.
You have a daughter out of that
I do.
union.
Yes, I do.
And look at you light up.
That's Pumpkin. Yeah, she's a great kid.
Fantastic. As a dad,
Yeah.
what do you think your role is as it relates to your daughter? Looking at and juxtaposing it to your parents.
Yeah. So she never, a couple things. One, she never feels some things I felt, sort of people not being there. I can't really count on them. Never feels alone.
Right.
Some of those things. I think to prepare her for when I'm not here.
Right.
Right. To be able to be a productive citizen, to follow her own dreams, to think for herself.
Now, how does being a fiercely independent parent work with having a child? Being a fiercely independent individual.
Well, the provision for her and guiding her doesn't conflict with me being independent.
Okay.
When I say independence, what I'm talking about is the freedom.
Okay.
To do those things in life that I think I want to pursue.
Okay.
To say those things to when I feel like it's necessary, to be able to do that without fearing that someone can take control of my life or can disrupt my life.
I got it.
So it's a freedom of mind and spirit. So it's not to be off and not have any impact. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay. So, if you could talk to that young dude back on Bethel Grove, sitting there eating a bowl of cereal, if you could talk to him today, what would you say to him?
It took me a while to get the confidence in what I could do, right? And who I could be and the impact I could have. So as a young person, I second guessed myself a lot. And I would tell him, don't second guess yourself. Go with your gut. Always bet on yourself. No matter what, bet on yourself. And that's probably the biggest thing I would say to him.
Okay. There's a lot of young men, young boys listening and watching you right now. I would like you to leave them with a Dr. Tyler-ism. Look right in that camera and talk to them directly, and what would you leave them with from today?
So much. Believe in yourself, be resilient, understanding that life is going to give you ups and downs, that it's important that you do the best you can in whatever you choose to do, right? And also it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to reset, right? But just keep moving forward. And whatever you can, however you can, avoid life-changing, disrupting bad decisions. And we believe in you.
If you have no confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race called life. This brother has definitely shared with us how he was able to develop that internal confidence. And you can do that too. Listen, we're going to keep bringing them back to you on the journey. Memphis icons showing you the way. Life and success is not a linear event. You're going to fall down, you're going to bump your head, you're going to skin your knees, but you got to keep getting up and moving forward. Thank you for joining us on the journey. I'm Larry Robinson for Dr. Floyd Tyler. Thank you for sharing your journey.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Till the next time. Thank you to our partner, the Grand Boulé of Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity Delta Chapter. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the KUDZUKIAN app from the App Store or Google Play, or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the KUDZUKIAN Network.